Hello, everybody. Right. I hope the sound was a little better on that one, and I should have better quality now too. The video quality should be better. The sound quality should be better. I got my own little internet figured out. I had to create my own little thing with, stuff that I know how to do that other people don't. So I get free internet. But that's beside the point. This is high bandwidth lines, so it should be solving some of those issues that a lot of you guys had witnessed with the sound quality and the visual quality and all those such things. So we are doing a wrap up of the 5.1 update. As I mentioned in the prior, we have hybrid networks upgraded right now, so that's already in process. That's been happening for quite a while because the private infrastructure doesn't have as many bells and whistles, I guess you could say, as the public infrastructure. So we have a lot more going on the public network versus the private network. So the core fundamentals is what really is represented by a private network, as far as the main smart contract functionality, and then we have all this other peripheral stuff that we have to deal with when we're dealing with the mainnet, such as staking and account management and client mode. So I've gotten the last few weeks I got most of the client mode stuff done. I ran into a bit of a snag with dependent transactions. Essentially, I wrote a lot of the original client mode software, the blocks, the client blocks. I created a whole new block structure to get to the mobile wallet working. And then I kind of handed it over to Paul when I was working on the constant time LOD. And, he was responsible for just kind of doing the final finishing touches. Essentially, what ended up happening, he just disabled most of the consensus rules. So as I was going through the code, I was just like, whoa, why are these critical rules deleted? And, essentially relying on third-party validation of contracts in order for the mobile wallet to work, which is kind of the antithesis of why we built a node on our mobile wallet, right? Is to not rely on trust. It'd be better to rely on the trust of a proxy than to rely on the trust of someone else processing contracts for you. But that's the way that the current beta version works, is you just, when you want to check if you can credit something, you actually have to send that entire contract over to another node, and then they're going to tell you whether it was processed or not processed, which works in theory. But then you have malicious actors, you have different people running different nodes. Once this really opens up, you're gonna, hey, I can't credit, and you're gonna get a lot of weird issues, because you're probably talking to a node that's saying that you can't, right? So you'll just, there will be a lot of really big, I wouldn't say big, but annoying attack vulnerabilities with that architecture. So I've kind of had to go through and just be like, okay, what are we going to do on this? Like, as you guys saw, Ethereum was talking about doing a mobile wallet in 2030. It's no easy feat, right? It's pretty easy to just say, okay, I'm going to do a UTXO and I just want to check a Merkle transaction to block headers, and boom, you don't really have any state that needs to be managed. But when you're dealing with a smart contract platform and a virtual machine, you have state that needs to be managed. So essentially, I've done it. It's done. I was up pretty late last night wrapping it up, but it's, you can check GitHub if you want, about 850 lines I think I pumped out last night. The lookup protocol is done. So essentially it's a separate protocol that's kind of like an additional service to the Tritium protocol. And so if you need any specific aspects of state that's relevant to you, you just grab a Merkle verified, transaction essentially, and it keeps a temporary store of that. So if you're like, I want to look up somebody's name, right, and I want to send to a specific account under a specific name, it's not going to work because you don't have that name in your sig chain. So essentially what you need to do, Currently, at least, is it does a little lookup, but it, that's kind of one thing that started a lot of this indexing. If you guys have seen the dynamic indexing services, because Paul ran into a bug where he's grabbing a Merkle transaction and downloading it, but then that writes last hash, and he wasn't separating the indexes so that you download one sig chain, but then you want someone else's name record, but then that person with that name record wants to log into that same sig chain, and you get all these weird issues. So he was just going and adding more and more complexity to try to fix it. And that's where I was like, stop, bro. Okay, if you're chasing bugs like that, you have an architectural issue. Okay, you stop, reassess. I mean, that's kind of at the point when we kind of split ways. So as I was going through the API refactor, that was an additional thing that I had to figure out, is how to essentially manage all this smart contract state without the need for trust, right? Because the entire premise of having our own node running on a mobile wallet is to not require trust, and it also doesn't rely on any centralized infrastructure that could potentially go down, right? So if you have, let's say a proxy, then, somebody doesn't pay a server bill and the mobile wallet is completely reliant on that proxy server, everything else goes down in response, and the mobile wallets go down when it's a decentralized infrastructure. So decentralization is also not just an ethical or thing of principle, but it's also it keeps your uptime higher, right? Decentralization has many other benefits. But so long story short, I got the whole state management system fixed, and I've already wrote the dynamic indexing services, but it is I kind of ran into a snag. This was within the last few weeks of okay, well, if I have this specific contract state, okay, I need to request additional data from that specific state. But if you only have one connection open, and your message is processed in a queue, well, I need this Merkle transaction to process this transaction here, but maybe that transaction's packet is 10 packets down. So how are you going to do that, right? If you need to request something on the same serial connection. So that's where I kind of I had to kind of sit and reassess things, and find at least architecturally, like what I feel is the most sound, and also is something that we can project out in the future too. A lot of the things that I do now is to save time in the future, right? All these foundational elements, it saves a lot of time. If we would have just gone with the prior version with just contract validation, I mean, sure, we would have the mobile wallet out, but right now you could be having issues crediting because some random node just decides to start just saying all of the contracts are rejected, right? And there's no real authentication on that. The way that it works, in the prior beta that's on the staging branches, there's no authentication, no proof. Doesn't matter. You can just send whatever message you want back to say, oh yeah, that was rejected. And if you're relying on that, the mobile wallet doesn't really know if they're trustworthy or not trustworthy. So architecturally, I solved that with creating a separate lookup protocol. And I created a lookup mechanism inside the register database too, so you don't get these conflicting states, because we have to verify like your pre-state to your post-state. So you can grab like the most recent state of a specific register, but then if you're downloading that sig chain linearly because you've logged into that account, the very first occurrence of that create will have a different state, right? Because you're using a state in the register database. So I had to create kind of a distinction between your mainnet level states and your contract level temporary processing states for dependence. Now, as you guys know about me, I like to do one thing to do many things. This sets up a foundation for sharding, right? So when you're sharding and you have a dependent transaction in another shard, you need to have some sort of Merkle verification to grab those dependents to process that transaction. So this is essentially setting up, in that process. And then it also spawned me to create a new lower level protocol, which ended up coming together pretty quickly, thankfully. But that kind of set me up to be designing this reverse proxy system in my head too. So I'm not making any promises, but I've got a couple surprises that I want to give you guys, but I'm not going to tell you. But you're going to see it before the full release. A couple things that I think will be really beneficial as far as things that are possible now without much additional runtime. But essentially, yeah, our smart contract state is all pretty much complete. If you have a dependent contract or a dependent transaction or a dependent register, or any sort of additional state that's required for your smart contract to process, during the processing, it is able to grab those through a blocking message protocol and a triggering system that I created. and boom, you got it, right? So it's really kind of, it's just, the next couple days is just piping everything together and then getting that pushed over to Kendall and Christo. As we talked about with you guys, we'll have our release schedule, which is first the hybrid networks, which is the first most important thing. And then we go into the first desktop and mobile wallet next release. We want the desktop wallet to include the client mode functionality as well. So it's not, we could, release the client mode with a limited scope, of functionality as far as like, oh, this can process most of these things, but not this. But I really wanted to get it functional and working in every possible case of a full node, except for staking and mining. Just because the hard disk space is ironically kind of an odd commodity these days. I mean, everybody's got all their videos and their pictures, and they don't really want to sacrifice it. And the wallet bootstrap and load time is the biggest user-friendly hurdle that we have right now. That's where a lot of these other wallets, like Electrum, or I think it was Electrum, maybe I'm like thinking really old school, not Coinami. It was the one that people paid millions of dollars to have like their ERC20 token added to it, and it looked really pretty and stuff, and everyone loved it. But the instant load and instant sync, I think, is a feature that a proxy-based wallet system can provide, right? Where it obviously relies on trust, but we want to do both. We want to get the best of both worlds. So I want to get the wallet bootstrapping really quick. Which in this case, with some new modifications I made to the lower level database, this is without a huge bandwidth limitation, but I think my desktop over there synced a mobile client mode in 12 seconds with a pretty fast internet connection. So that's a pretty significant sync speed, right? Ideally, if you have high-speed internet and your computer's got a reasonable amount of computing power, you should be able to download the desktop wallet and then be up and running in 30 to 60 seconds as far as like ready to go. Because I by default, I want them to run as clients, right? So you'll have to enable your full node. And if you want to bootstrap to a full node because you want to stake or something like that, I want to have a process where it's like, okay, you start up the wallet, you open it up, boom, within 30 to 60 seconds, the wallet's synced, ready to go. You can send transactions, log in, create accounts, all of that. But then if you want to stake, then it'll say, a little pop-up, hey, do you want to stake? Do you want to, that's going to require you to have, X amount additional disk space requirement. I think we're like 20 or 30 gigs right now. Would you like to start that process? And if you've noticed on the bootstrapping process, the node doesn't usually need to run when you're bootstrapping. You're just downloading a tar and unzipping it. The client mode runs kind of in its own separate state anyhow. So what I want to have happen is you'll be able to run it in a client or run as a client in client mode. And then when it comes around to running a full node, you can bootstrap in parallel to running your client nodes so that you just have a nice little bootstrap progress bar if you want to set it up for a full node. So you'll still be able to use the wallet. And it should have every feature. That's what I've been designing it to have, every single feature that a full node has. It's set for staking and mining. And the only reason being is it's kind of a circular dependency. To mine and stake, you are processing transactions. When you're processing transactions, you need to verify that all of those contracts execute to true. If you don't verify that, then you could include bad transactions, and then your hard-earned, mined block or staked block is just going to disappear, right? It's not going to be accepted in the network, so you're going to waste all of that work. So you need to verify those things beforehand. Since client mode is it's operating under a limited scope, your own local scope, it doesn't have all the transactions that have ever happened. It doesn't keep track of all of those things. It doesn't keep all of those things in a queue. So you can't process or mine or stake without having all the transactions. And if you have all the transactions, then you've got a full blockchain and you got a full node anyway, right? So that kind of circular dependency is why we're not going to allow like staking on the mobile wallet, I think, right now anyway. Pooled staking potentially, but there's potential issues of abuse that we want to essentially look at as far as the pooled staking protocol. That's another reason I wanted to kind of give it a little more time to make sure that the process that we implemented had, the right security properties. So there's all of that, which is good. And getting all of this in this lookup protocol developed too has been really nice to kind of get me freshen into more reverse proxy mindsets as well, because reverse proxy is going to be really important for a number of huge features. One of the really fundamental features, I think what I'm seeing, prioritizes people on remote login. They want peer-to-peer messenger, and we want to have profiles. So those are three big things, right? You want to be able to manage different sig chains from one sig chain is essentially what profiles does. So you have one set of credentials and it allows you to manage a set of credentials for all others. The only, I guess you could say, hang up in that specific architecture right now is in handling, sorry, just had a brain fart. Sorry, I didn't get much sleep last night. One of the only sticks in handling those profiles is if you're changing your passwords and you're changing your credentials, right? So you don't want to de-anonymize it. So profiles, think of it as creating an unlinkability. It's de-anonymizing a lot of aspects of your specific sig chain. So you can have, my staking sig chain, and then I can have like a public profile, maybe my society sig chain for, the society DApp. And then maybe I have, a different app, and it's going to go synonymous with remote login too, because you'll want to generally create a new profile for each new app that you register for. I would generally not recommend you to use your staking credentials for, logging on society. But you'll still be able to use your staking trust key to sign offline messages if you want to prove to some other individual that you have some certain amount of trust. You can prove linkability to the select individuals that you want, but you keep the public linkability completely anonymous. So that way you can have your separation of assets. I can have some of my staking coins here. I can have some of my spending coins on this profile. I have my public persona on this profile, and then I have my private social media on this profile, and so on and so forth, right? And so you'll get this kind of like hardware passage manager that coming from the SIG chain, right? And then the encryption is another really important feature. But what I'm seeing is the number one pressing feature from people is the remote login. I'm seeing people really want that. And the peer-to-peer messenger, the framework itself doesn't necessarily mean like, oh, hey, Nexus is Signal now, but it's a framework to be able to provide peer-to-peer messaging using post-quantum encryption. So pretty much, I'm in contact right now with Crystal and Kendall. We're preparing for the next build, for the using the final 5.1 core. As I said, I knocked out a lot the last few days as far as getting the lookup protocol done, and that, like I said, sets it up for the future. Future-proofs it for when we have full augmented contract functionality that's sharded. Let's say you're operating on a specific subset of a shard, you'll still be able to process everything, but you're not going to become a bottleneck for other people. And you still get the full contract state without needing to rely on any trust. And the reason we don't have to rely on trust in that method is because we're using Merkle verification to verify the Merkle branch through to the Merkle root of each specific block header. And as long as you maintain a linear chain of blocks, and you know that there's a linear series of blocks that come from some genesis to some height, and that they all pass the proof of work, that means that anything that maps with a Merkle branch into that Merkle root happened on the blockchain irrefutably, because all of the other nodes around have confirmed that, right? And if that block is added to the blockchain and it passes all your main core consensus rules, then you have essentially a fully functional smart contract platform. So killing multiple birds with many stones and getting that setup has been really, I think, beneficial, just because it creates, at least to me, it feels more right. It feels more correct. And that's kind of one reason why sometimes you'll notice delays happen. I'm a bit of a perfectionist. If you haven't noticed, I'll say, this isn't good enough. I'm a little persnickety about it. So, it ends up creating really great code, but the time is not one of my strongest points, and understanding and predicting it, which, obviously I'm working on improving with everybody. But I appreciate everybody's patience. I appreciate you guys sticking with it. And I'm really happy with the progress. I really am. I mean, I wish it was faster, but the way it's all come together, and architecturally, the way it's all been set up, I've been really happy with it. I'm seeing the API. I mean, anybody that's using the new 5.1 core. I mean, even when Kendall fired up, he's like, "Holy shit, it's freaking fast!" It's just ridiculously fast compared to what it was before. And it's only going to get faster because this doesn't include the constant time lower level database, right? But I got the syncing time to, I think, about 2 or 3 times as fast now as it was before. So that makes the synchronization faster. We're working on different methods to bootstrap at least the block headers. I'm not going into blockchain compression right now. I could tack off. I think I can knock off 300 or 400 megabytes off of the client mode chain. I'm not going into that right now, though, just for specific priorities. I want to make sure that we have, the core fundamental features done. But that was the kind of snags that I've been running into as I've gotten everything syncing and running. I just keep running into these consensus rules that were disabled that I just couldn't in good conscience feel right about allowing. And then it just has created this is what I say about architectural issues. Like you can't just go and be like, oh, hey, I'm going to disable this rule to make it work, because then that's like a whack-a-mole, and then something else pops up, and then something else pops up, and that's kind of what was happening. Is it's like, okay, well, now you have fragmented sig chains, and now you got to iterate through all the sig chain transactions to make sure that you have a consistent blah blah blah, and then you got to add this extra complexity and this extra complexity because of this complexity that you didn't think about, and then it's a reactive coding, right? And it just makes a mess. It just makes a mess. I mean, I, to myself, will delete my own code if I feel like it's becoming problematic or if I'm running into architectural issues. And that's just one thing that I couldn't really set aside. I couldn't, in good conscience, feel that that is the appropriate way to process these contracts. Even something as simple as, an expiring contract, which, in reality, the expiring contract doesn't really require any external state other than your dependent transaction, but it wasn't set up to be able to request dependent transactions in the process queue. And we could have used some of the prior, it was all kind of piggybacking in through the same Tritium protocol, but that's why I felt like it was just most appropriate to create our own lookup LLP that acts as a secondary service to the Tritium protocol. And then I've been also designing the reverse proxy system, which will be kind of a combination of reverse proxy and distributed hash table and somewhat like Tor, where you'll connect to some nodes. So this way it takes care of NAT, traversal network address translator, traversal, so you don't need to open up ports. So that means that no matter where you are, no matter what router or whatever, you don't have all these issues of, oh, do I need to use NAT PNP or UPnP or PCP, port control protocol, in order to open up and forward your incoming port. You can just make an outgoing connection to a reverse proxy, but then you have the discoverability issue. Okay, well, how do I discover that you're connected to node 1.nexus.io, but like I'm connected to node 4.nexus.io, and I'm trying to figure out how to put a remote login request, or I want to send a peer-to-peer message request. How do you bridge that gap? And that's where you get kind of what I was saying with like kind of an onion routing distributed hash table between those different nodes, and that way it should remain really efficient. And that reverse proxy system is multi-pronged. It's usable for more than just remote login and peer-to-peer messaging and all of those other things. It also sets up too for I guess additional VPN technology. And then I've been studying the OpenVPN protocol. I think that's what I'm going to go for our VPN. I would ideally like to create our own VPN protocol. I'm very critical of protocols, especially plain text protocols. I'm just, like hypertext transfer protocol. Dude. Or short message transfer protocol, or wait, the great one, email. POP. Guess what it stands for? I mean, post office protocol. Woohoo! It has nothing to do with the post office. It's just a bunch of random words. But I understand the need for plain text protocols, as they designed them to be easier to debug. But I'm more of a kind of like low level binary protocol type of guy. That's just how I work. So ideally, I would prefer not to use OpenVPN. But there's just so many OpenVPN clients out there, and so much support for that on native operating systems. It just doesn't make sense to write our own VPN protocol, because then we're gonna have to develop our own client. You're gonna have to install on the mobile phone and all of that. So I'm just keeping it simple in that way. But OpenVPN I've been working with it quite a lot more recently, and I've been developing the algorithms too of how you engage in some of these hosting contracts. And we can do a type of, I've always been critical, if anybody remembers, I've been very critical of proof of bandwidth type of protocols. People have talked about it, like, oh, hey, proof of bandwidth. I've been highly critical of it, just because you can't hash packets fast enough and prove that actually bandwidth events happened, right? But and same with the file system, and I think that's why the Filecoin guys and other things like I think Sentinel they failed. I mean, Filecoin, I guess you could argue that it's still going, but I mean, from what I've heard, technically speaking, it's garbage. But in order to have like a scalable file system and things like that, you can't. I think they manage everything through the chain, and then they push and then mint from the blocks from the miners on proof that a file has been used and delivered, and you just have all these levels of complexity that aren't necessary. What really you need is to look at what's your final function, what's your final result that you're looking to gain. Okay, well, I have a file and I want to make sure my file is available. That's from the buying side. From the selling side, I have disk space that I want to make sure is filled and I want to be paid for it. So how do you make that work, right? The whole proof hashing, every little aspect of it can be a little bit more cumbersome, and you're going to end up costing more than you're going to save by adding all these additional data requirements. So the way our hosting contracts work is essentially just kind of a peer-to-peer contract, and you have your own essentially reputation and state management and redundancy, obviously too, so that you are responsible, or your wallet is responsible for making sure that your contract is being fulfilled, rather than making the blockchain responsible for proving all of these events have happened and using that to enforce some sort of monetary incentive. All you have to do is just create a type of automatically executing recurring contract that obviously you'll have kind of a node that you have to connect to in chain to say, hey, I'm engaging in this contract with you, and here's the proof of that engagement and the proof of the terms of the contract. But the enforcement of the contract essentially comes from, am I going to give you money, or am I going to still give you files, right? And if I see that the availability has been removed and I can't get those files that I've been asking for, then I'm going to terminate the contract, right? And I'm not going to pay you. And then if the contract is terminated prematurely, right, if it doesn't have a sunset in it, then your reputation gets dinged, so that you have a cost associated with not being a good file hoster, and then you have a way to redeem that without having to touch the chain for every little thing. You use the chain to talk about the more fundamental, important aspects of it. So that's kind of a little bit of a rundown of how the file system works, and essentially how the VPN system will work as well. You just create kind of a type of VPN contract, and instead of having to track every byte that's been transferred to and from and verify all of that and hash it, because some people have talked about that. I know I've gone into architectural discussions with them where they'll say, okay, well, I want to do proof of bandwidth, and I keep trying to explain to them, I'm like, you cannot hash packets that fast. The hashing algorithms have a specific, limitation in how fast you can hash. That's the whole premise behind Bitcoin proof of work. You're going to create more bottlenecks than you're going to really save by trying to prove bandwidth. But if you look at it indirectly and say, well, what's the result of the type of proof of bandwidth system? And then how do we gain that same result without all of this additional, cumbersome architecture? Then you have, a really improved system, right? And one that can handle a scale and grow. So that's essentially where everything's at. That's where my head's at. Things are moving slow and steady. I mean, I wouldn't say I don't really get stuck. I just kind of run into a point where like, oh, okay, this needs to be reassessed. And I was hoping to minimize the amount of things that need to be reassessed for this update, just for the sake of brevity and time. I wanted to just get this out the door for you, but there's just some things that just, okay, I need to do a lookup protocol on this. But I got a bug list from Anwise, who's been really helpful with providing feedback and testing. So he caught a few bugs. More recently, I've been fixing that. I have to go jump into the test net after that and make sure that I have that correct. And then essentially, yeah, it's pretty much ready to ship. So I'm working with Crystal and Kendall on getting that next beta put together. Today is Thursday, so I'm probably not going to go too long on this AMA. I'll probably give it another 18 minutes for questions after this, just for the sake of time, because I want to get back to coding and get stuff done. So everything seems good. And what's it called? After we have the full desktop release, we're going to do a beta desktop release first, and after we do the actual, this is the desktop wallet release, that's going to have a time lock activator in there. If Robert was asking about that yesterday, time lock is essentially just a Unix timestamp in the future that activates a new rule. right? So, you verify the rule through the block version or the transaction version, and then you activate that transaction version at a point in the future. So that way you don't get consensus failure if, multiple nodes have different rules that you're changing. Let's say, you're changing the way you verify a signature or something. If you don't synchronize that, then two nodes are going to be, disagreeing on the actual rules. You have to synchronize these updates together. So I'm doing an update on the difficulty algorithm. There's some old code from kind of 2015 that I put in. Just if anybody recalls back that day, we launched a Nexus. Like each of the even channels, they launched independently of one another. It started, the network just launched on Prime, and then the hash channel launched a bit after that, and then the staking channel launched a bit after that. But the way that the reserve system works is it didn't mint, but it deposited that much into the reserve after the month, which I think ended up being like 3 million Nexus, and it wouldn't deplete. It wasn't depleting. So I created an adjustment in the difficulty where it would cut the target in half if your supply in the reserve was above a certain value. And that still exists in there, and that kind of messes with some of the difficulty adjustments from being as consistent as they need to be. So I just decided, since everybody's upgrading, everyone's waiting for 5.1, I might as well just go in and do that. That's been something I've been wanting to do, but I've been kind of trying to push everything into a hard fork setting so that we don't have to have too many hard forks. But we're basically at a hard fork anyway with 5.1. I think everyone's going to upgrade to 5.1, so we might as well add some of that into it. And then we haven't done any of the joint budgeting sessions. Maybe Phil can comment on that. I think it's going to be coming time where we need to have some of that to ratify our budgets. And this is just the branch budgeting session. So if everyone recalls, you have arms in a branch. So, the interactions, impressions, all that, that's ambassador arms. And then you have developer arms, which are interface, logical, mining, and the Tau and LXOS. So we allocate our ARM budgets monthly. That's an internal thing. They can have it monthly, but we need to do start ratifying our larger branch budgets. So we're going to be going through that, which will open up a good discussion. We will be posting when that specific video chat will be. We invite everyone to be a part of that discussion. We definitely, community feedback is important, but that's going to essentially be setting the split of the funds available between, either, developers or ambassadors. And right now the fund income is about 88,000 Nexus. That's being split, I think, 60,000 to developers and 28,000 to ambassadors is what our split is right now. I think it's about 70-30. That, there's some talk about maybe allocating more to developers or maybe more to ambassadors. We'll cross that bridge when we cross that bridge. But that's something to look forward to. The coder, yes. So I've been looking for someone to download my brain into, and as you've seen, everyone I've tried to ended up kind of having to fire them because either they started out really enthusiastic and wanted to really do a good job, and then like it got to their head and they got full of themselves and then their work slacked, or their work was really never that good, or they thought they were better than they were. Or like this is a long laundry list of all these reasons. But this person that I spoke to is he's brilliant, very brilliant. Like he's usually the smartest guy in the room. He's an embedded systems architect, and he was an engineer, sorry, and he was really interested in what we're doing. We're still continuing the discussions and things like that. I mean, it was just an initial get him interested, which was really cool to see that he was most interested in the social architecture, which to me I think is fundamental. All this other technology. I mean, look at Ethereum, right? It's a big centralized oligarchy, but yet it's decentralized, right? The social architecture is really the biggest symptom of centralization. So, I was really happy to hear he was really fascinated with that and the social experiment that we're doing and things like that. So, ideally, over the next few months, I'll keep you guys in the loop. Potentially get him to come on and introduce himself at some point. He's brilliant. He understood. I actually was like, oh, you speak English, cool. Like, well, we can talk. And I just like unloaded, and he could handle it for the most part. I kind of shredded him after a while, but it was good. He shredded me a bit too. It was a great mutual conversation. We were drinking too many Red Bulls, and smoking tobacco is great. But so I'll keep you guys posted on that. I'm not sure it could potentially begin voluntary. So get him kind of training and understanding, and he understands he does a lot of embedded work. So ideally, he could help get LXOS moving more. Right now, I've been kind of focused primarily on the Tau since Paul's departure. So I've been trying to straddle both, but I'm building Tau stuff for LXOS stuff. But it would be nice to know LXOS was booting and moving, and you could start using it and stuff like that. 3D interface guys are waiting on this update. Got to follow up with them. But as you know, 3D interface, 3D, it's 3D operating system GUI. Just think of a three-dimensional user experience that's not going to be like your whole meta world. We want to redirect that away from go living our lives in these virtual worlds and use virtualization and all those types of things to augment our current functionality and augment our ability to organize data in a spatial system rather than just like two-dimensional plane where you have all these layers of tabs and stuff. I mean, look at your tabs. Like everybody, I'm sure you just look at your tabs. Go look at your tabs in your web browser right now and be like, yo, I really let myself go, right? Everybody, I'm sure will say that because y'all probably have 20 or 30 tabs going. And you can't even read the tabs anymore, right? So you don't even know what's what anymore. And then what's the point? Well, because I don't want to lose it. I don't want to forget about what site I was on. Oh, I'm attached to that, but I never go to that tab. But I just want to know that tab's there for when I want to know that it's there. But then it's inhibiting every other function where I can't even read the actual tabs that I'm trying to use, right? Symptom of two-dimensional interfaces. We are reaching the upper limit of saturation of graphical user interfaces as we are now with the complexity of data modeling that we're going to in the world. We're reaching that upper bound. So these guys developed this just from dealing with really large data sets in the military and not being able to organize that data very efficiently, effectively, and started essentially modeling three-dimensional systems for that. So we'll probably get them coming on soon at some point in the future as well. I want to get more discussion about those specific things. I think that's just about it I have to update on this specific round. Again, I'm sorry guys, I got overexcited the last AMA and was like, yay, I have one more thing to do, and then oh wait, now I need to write a lookup protocol. So it took a little longer, and I really have been. I mean, for some of you that I've told, like it's not just like some like I stubbed my toe and I'm like like it's not like it's been some serious shit that's been happening in my life, personally related to my kids and their safety and a bunch of. It's just been a roller coaster. Thankfully, got it. It's still active, but I've got my head in a really good place, and I've made. I was able to execute some of the things that were necessary to be executed, and it's done. And my children they're safe now. They're good, recovering, but it's been a whirlwind. So it's been difficult for me to really be able to get a whole lot of time. And it's been kind of sporadic here and there the last month or two, just because of my emotional bandwidth and everything has been really consumed with a lot of making sure my children are safe. It's been we got 5 kids, so it's a lot, but we've got a really good flow now. So everything's going good. I've been getting a good flow at least this week. It's been nice. A lot of that stuff is resolved now. And then, like I said, I got a really nice algorithm. I told you, with a reverse proxy system, which I'm excited to share. And I want to give you guys a present. Like I missed the Christmas present. I missed the New Year's. Not for lack of trying, but I want to give you guys a present. So you might get a present. We'll see. But it's going to be a surprise. You're not going to know what it is. You're going to just have to sit and wonder, and what is it going to be? Well, I mean, it's obviously going to be code, but what code? I've been doing better, getting more active on Twitter. Again, make sure you tag me if you want my comment on something. Give me a tag, and I'll do a quote tweet for you. Pass that along. I haven't always been checking the Twitter channel, but if I'm not responding or whatever, you can ping Phil. He's usually good at getting me, or Kat or Themad or Aaron or whatever. Just ping someone that is like close and whatever. And then Anarchapulco, we're playing music for Ron Paul's ball, so we're doing some, yay, harp, for Ron Paul. I'm going to make contact with the guy. He still remembers me. And I'm working on developing stronger contact with Bobby Kennedy. I met with him in April. Really cool guy. He's got spasmodic dystonia, which if you've ever heard him talk, he can't talk very well. So we're working on a remedy. And I got a few other people too. Like I'm reaching out to the right people for the right moments to kind of to grow the Nexus. I just spoke with someone too that I spoke with at CES, Consumer Electronics Show in 2019, I believe. And she's doing some really cool stuff. And so there's, we're putting feelers out there. Like I still have a pretty good roster of contacts from, over the years. So I'm cashing some of those in as we get. I've been really waiting for all of this 5.1 stuff to be cleared and done and solid, to really start, pushing the marketing forward. So yeah, all is well. I mean, everything's going good. I mean, I can't really complain. I mean, I just need to start doubling or tripling my expectations, my timeline. And that's something, I mean, that's a pretty common thing for contractors to do. It's just like, double the time. And I usually like cut it in half because I'm like, I just want to make everyone happy. If you guys didn't notice, I love everyone. Like I love people. I do this because I love you guys. So, that's one of my pitfalls. So, if you guys ever get frustrated with me, just remember that. But it's it's that I want to meet those marks, but I just am not always aware of my physical limitations. And it's a lot easier up here because I don't know what that was. Okay, we're recording. Sweet. Okay, I'm not muted now, Phil. So yeah, everything's good. Speaking at Anarchapulco, like I said, I'm gonna make contact with Ron again. Still have a really good rapport. I have his phone number. We were chatting for quite a while. He's really interested in a lot of the blockchain voting stuff, so I want to get him and Kitsinich talking about that again. Maybe get Bobby Kennedy involved in that again. Like 1 degree of separation, and like I said, we're playing music for his ball, for the special Ron Paul ball dinner. We're headlining and just doing some harp, piano, cool stuff. So I'll see what kind of comes of that. And then we're doing a couple cool workshops at Anarchapulco this year. Tasha's teaching the first half of this one about essentially it's essentially the foundation of feng shui. She's done a lot of work with them, and she figured out how to graph them and found some really interesting bilateral stimulation and things happening. So she's going to be teaching a lot about the history of them, and then we'll go into some of our nerdy, romantic, things with numbers. I find her numbers, and they're very beautiful. But I found some really cool stuff, and made some cool stuff. If anybody knows, there's a few people about it. It's some cool stuff, but it's essentially to create neurological healing through bilateral audio visual stimulation. By essentially helping to rearrange the thoughts and in creating kind of a more harmonious thinking pattern and more harmonious, associations. And one of the reasons why, this is a lot of Tasha's work, and then I just kind of, jumped in a little bit later and found some squares, and then also put them together and whoa, this is crazy stuff. But there's also some, if you're thinking about we're building a global democratic system, right? Well, don't your people need to be educated and free of traumas? Because, if you have trauma reflex, then you're easy to manipulate, right? And then it's difficult for you to actually choose on your own volition something that you actually would like to create, right? So people need healing, or our minds need a lot of healing. There's a lot of sickness out there. So there's that aspect to it. There's the visual aspects, and then there's, a lot of other things. It'll be a really interesting workshop. And then, so she's teaching most of it, and I'm just kind of jumping in at the end and, sharing some things I found. But if anyone hasn't researched into it, Benjamin Franklin, look up Franklin squares. He was one of the founding fathers of the United States. He birthed the type of square. He was really fascinated with it. These things have been, thousands of years old. They've been fascinated. It's at the foundation of what creates feng shui. Feng shui is actually It's an Eastern concept where the way you organize objects in a room, and they actually, you can't build a building in China without consulting feng shui. Like it's like they're big on it, right? You can't mess with it. So, and that's all just based off of this little number matrix, right? They're really simple concepts, but they're really powerful implications. And then doing another workshop. Both of them are free, so if you'll be in Anarchapulco, come join. Phil will be there too, running the booth. We're sponsoring the art car, so you'll see Nexus is the main sponsor for all the art stuff. And Tash is doing some live art. We're doing it now, which is actually what you're going to be doing there. So preview. Okay, but so that's going to be happening. There's going to be an auction off. So you'll see Nexus around a lot on the Anarchapulco stuff. They're doubling the event size this year, so it'll be 1,000 people. And like I said, I've been kind of rallying the troops per se, reaching out to the right people and, seeing who gets back and who doesn't. But I'm excited for that event. And then I'm doing another workshop on our DAO architecture, social architectures, decentralized social architectures. I think I'll be a lot more prepared this year than last year. Last year we were still testing and I didn't have like definitive protocols and diagrams and stuff like you guys have wanted. So this will essentially allow that to happen. We'll create diagrams and do handouts. So both of these workshops will be free. I think they're the only ones that are for free. So come join. It's a lot of really, really relevant information, and it's all interlinked. It's all interwoven together. And then I'm speaking, obviously, this time I'm going to focus on philosophical discussions more than technical. I think I can give you guys the whole download of all the technical stuff on these AMAs for you troopers that want to go into all of the details with me. But we will want to, I'm shifting to more philosophical, so it's more relatable to people and stuff. So that'll be fun. I'm really looking forward to Anarchapulco this year. I think that's just about it. Is Phil? Do you wanna drop in and say anything? Are you in a talk mood, or what are you feeling?
I'm driving right now, so next time.
All right. Anyone else want to jump in and give any updates on arms? What's going on in your arm? DApps, anything like that? Or should I just start asking or answering questions? Yeah, there no miss, huge. Well, no miss. Okay. I love you, man. But huge news coming, sir. I did not say huge news. I said, well, I guess you could call it huge news. I mean, 5.1's coming out. Beta's almost done. Lookup protocol's done. Details. And I'm working on some surprises for you guys that you're not going to know about until they're done. It's going to be fun. Because I'm having a lot of fun. And I just did something that was really fun. And it's just like all the gears are turning of like, oh, it's only one step away to do this and this and this. So I'm going to do it. This is fun. But just, no, I mean, come on, Amazon and Google, dude. Like, for one, we will never partner with Amazon and Google, okay? Ever, ever, ever. Stop feeding the beast, okay? We're not here to feed the beast. We're here to slay the beast. And we don't do that by partnering with them, okay? No partnerships with Amazon and Google. Don't make rumors. It's bullshit. Okay. You didn't see it on the radio. See, this is how rumors begin, guys. Look, just look in Telegram. No miss, you missed. You missed pretty bad. Community questions. Theoretically, Bitcoin adopts Tritium and starts using LOD. It can do all of that because we are open source. Won't that threaten the Nexus? Let me just phrase your question with a question. Do all the shitcoins who copied Bitcoin source code threaten Bitcoin? I don't know. Who's number one still? Bitcoin. Number two. Will there be a template for Starfish member invoices? Yes, we're working on the template and improving the invoice module. Some of that's coming from the interactions arm. They're helping tune that out, but obviously community feedback important. If you guys see anything that you think needs to be added as you're auditing any additional data, those are going to become a strict protocol that's adhered to. Right now it's not really enforcing a whole lot on that, just because it it works, but we need to have a really consistent standard from here. So maybe that can be something that we can bring up at the joint session when we have the ambassador developer and judicial chairs in the joint discussion. That can be, I guess, an item to bring up as part of the agenda, because that would be something that would definitely want to be ratified across the branches. Does the connection to the node have to be reciprocal or not? Connection to the node, reciprocal. Like if somebody connects to you incoming, do I have to connect to them outgoing? Not generally. Everything is kind of its own. You're just stateless. You don't really have a need for things to be reciprocal. It's just designed to be open, and the more you give, the more other people can give back or not, and you can leech and whatever. But there's certain precautions to protect against that, like DDoS throttling and message limitations and things like that. I mean, like in client mode, for instance, in order to subscribe to your SigChain events and actually have that data processing happen, you have to make a digital signature. So you actually have to sign from a crypto object registry to verify that you are actually the person that owns that SigChain, so that you can't have people just go subscribe to everyone's SIP chains and get a lot of that data and also burden other nodes. So there's pretty open. There's not really a requirement for you to be reciprocal, but it's generally good to have some sort of open incoming ports. I have a question about the hash mining pool. Why the pool goes down so often, and why the website sometimes goes up. I mean, that's not. I have no part of the mining arm. That would be directed to Andrew Hatstat. What could be done to fix it? I mean, I could go into the code and check it out. I mean, I'm presuming the hash pool goes down a lot because whatever code was implemented in there, I think it was Bushel that implemented it. You should contact him. Usually hash pools go down from segmentation faults, so you need to run GCC address sanitize equals address, and do an address sanitizer, and obviously enable debug too, and check, and then when it crashes, you'll get a little stack trace of exactly where this is talking to you, Bushel, and that will show you exactly where the violation is happening. It might make sense to do that, but I'm not going to get to that until after I finish 5.1, but I can take a look at that later. I think they did their own threading protocol model, and I'll just go in and have to look at it at some point, but I can only do so many things. So I have nothing to do with the hash pool. That would be Andrew Hatstat, that's the chair. How ETH Explorer worked, how do you get their data to do you know? They scrape all the data from the chain, how the ETH Explorer works. So every time an ETH block comes through, then they dump that into a bigger MySQL database, and then they use the structured query language to query and search for specific aspects within that chain. But that requires you to build this entire database set on top of everything, and then make sure that those two databases are synchronized, and so on and so forth. So it's cumbersome, it's inefficient, and you don't get native access to all these different things like we do. When we log out of the wallet still shows 16 connections. What is the difference when we are logged in or when we are not? Connections are totally separate from when you're logged in or not. Connections are just your node talking to other nodes. When you're logged in, it has nothing to do with any external connections. Logging into your wallet is just logging in and storing your credentials in an encrypted pointer on your local disk. Connections are connected to other people. And that's how you get blocks and transactions, and that's how all that data is passed around the network. So 16 connections, generally because the max outbound connections is set to 16. So if you don't have port forwarding enabled or your router doesn't support it, you're not going to get any incoming connections, so you'll never see over 16. But some people can get up to 50 to 100, depending on if they have incoming ports available or not, and if their address seed has gone out into the network. Is it possible to send a payment that first gets split and then sent to several SIG chains at one click, sort of feature down the line? Yeah, so Sohan, you just do finance, debit, any. So finance, debit, any. And that allows mixed token debit. So you can literally combine any number of tokens, any different types of tokens, any different accounts and values to different SIG chains to different people. And it automatically selects your accounts. So you don't have to do a from account on finance debit any. You just do finance debit any, and then include in your JSON strings all your different recipients and all those individual recipients, and it will fire off to all of them in one single transaction. heard that the industry is moving towards IPv6. Well, yeah, IPv6 has been around for almost 30 years now, I think 20 years, and it's not there yet. They want to move to IPv6 for Internet of Things and stuff, but there's just a massive incentive issue because you have to pay for new routers to upgrade to IPv6, and if you have to pay for new routers, it's going to cost you money. And if you have, millions of dollars in Cisco routers and you're a large company, you're not going to really want to change it, right? So, yeah, it's just IPv6 will probably take another 30 years before you're like reliably using it. And they've been trying to get people to move to it for 20 or 30 years, but I still very rarely see an IPv6 address. I'm seeing it a little bit more commonly now, but generally it's still all IPv4, just because it's a hardware-defined network, not software-defined. So when it's a hardware-defined network, you have to upgrade the hardware to upgrade the capabilities. When it's software-defined, you can just simply upgrade the software. So that's one more reason why we're developing software-defined routing, which hasn't really been done from what I'm aware of. Software-defined routers will allow you to just upgrade. I mean, you could upgrade from an IP4 to an IPv6 with software-defined router just like that, with just an update. But with all of it being hardware-defined, a lot of routers are kind of like ASICs, application-specific integrated circuits, because there's just so much processing that they have. So they're hardware-defined, right? Like an ASIC with Bitcoin, you can't go upgrade your ASIC to a new firmware and like do a different hashing algorithm. It's the exact same hashing algorithm, transistor for transistor for transistor, if that makes sense. Same thing for that. But Lisp EID operates on IPv6 for the crypto EID, and we support that. Yes. Okay. Okay. Completely. Oh, you liked my reply, Chris? That's funny. Yeah. Let's see. August 2028 is all code, everything related. Just do your own research. Go look at your own shit. Like you can see all the fucking code, man. Like just yeah, whatever. Isn't that already possible to send payment? Yes, that's what I'm saying. With Mr. Wu, it's already possible to send the first payment. It's already good. You just have to do finance, debit, any, and all of that. Yeah. So I think that's it. Anyone else has any more questions? I'm good. Everyone else good? Anyone have any more? You can jump in. You can speak it if you want, or you can write it. No mas? Cool. Well, I'm going to get back to code. Yeah, I like surprises too. I figured you guys would like the surprises. Definitely. Yeah, and a lot of the code, a lot of the architecture is in my head, right? Like I spent a lot of time developing things in my head. And from there in my head, I'll develop it and then I'll just implement it. So, yesterday with the lookup protocol, I developed a lot of it in my head and then implemented it, about 1,000 lines in that day. So yeah, anything and everything is available and free and up online. So you're welcome to check it if you want to see it or not. And that's that. So I shall see you guys next time.